So this is an interesting question. You forgot to mention nuclear fusion in your five pillars of
Oh.
the 21st century. And no, I don't think I did. So it's important to understand that we don't have an energy crisis. We just don't.
Hmm.
If you look at just
Huh.
the coal reserves that we have, and we look at our capability to make coal work for the world, there's enough energy in coal for over 1,000 years across the entire world. You say, oh, but Charles, I've heard that coal is like the worst possible thing that we could do. Well, it depends. If you take a look at coal going to fly ash, you take a look at modern coal technology and our ability to sequester it, it's not a heavy lift to get to a point where coal would be a relatively acceptable energy source. And that fly ash can be put into geopolymer concrete, and you get a 90% reduction in the carbon output of concrete manufacturing, because you can completely replace Portland cement with fly ash, and you get tons of fly ash from coal power plants. So that's just one energy source, and there's a path to make that energy source incredibly environmentally friendly. And where you have abundance of geothermal and hydroelectric, what you can do is put carbon air capture there because you have such a large abundance, and you can offset all of the stuff that comes from coal. These other things that they claim, like radioactive substances coming from coal burning, well, it depends first your source of coal and how you treat the coal and the technology that you use, but it's no more so than bricks, and you have bricks in your wall. So that's just one example. Okay, then you have natural gas, and then you actually have next generation geothermals called EGS that exists. Okay, so none of these are nuclear, and they all produce enormous amounts of energy. And then you can also do other things that potentially could become base load, like you could create solar facilities in the desert and tidal power where and when that makes sense. And you could create a biofuel cycle that also works pretty well. So I don't think we have an energy problem at all. I think we have a policy problem where the people are, for some reason, destroying our power grid, and they're replacing it, a base load, efficient, optimized power grid with an intermittent power grid with a very expensive energy storage situation, which we have yet to solve. So then they said, well, don't worry, we'll have fusion at some point. And there actually has been incredible progress with nuclear fusion. We have laser fusion, and they've National Ignition Facility, and they've reached ignition, and they've gotten to a point where they're energy positive, and that technology will continue to grow. And there's a really cool tech you can build there. We're starting to actually see real progress with the ITER project in France, and also stellarators in Germany are getting very promising results. So in the 2030s, 2040s, 2050s, we're going to have an energy revolution where nuclear fusion is definitely going to transform things. That's great. And you also can use fourth generation nuclear power with this as well, because they're meltdown proof and they do some amazing things, and they also produce a lot. But ask yourself this, does the existence of excess energy production so transformative to the human race that everybody is now no longer human? No. All it does is it just makes what we have more sustainable and better, faster, cheaper, and it allows us potentially to be cleaner and live better lives. But it's not the case that the existence of this technology is now going to allow you to change the color of your skin just by thinking about it, or interface with a computer and learn a book in 5 seconds. Okay, extra energy is required when you become an interstellar species and you're doing really interesting big things. And yeah, we have an energy demands that we have to meet, but it's not the case that nuclear fusion is in that same category. When you look at the four horsemen, nanotechnology, synthetic biology, quantum computing, and AI, you're literally talking about technologies that, when they're put together, fundamentally transform our environment and fundamentally transform what it means to be human. Okay, so for example, one of the things that we're doing here is something called Attune, and I'd love for Tam to talk about it in just a second. But it's just basically a communication technique for people to better understand each other and have more empathy and be aware of why people are saying the things that they say, and connecting with them at a deeper level. So we don't have to deal with toxicity in the workplace, and we feel like we can build better relationships and connections with people. Now, you could spend the next 30 years deeply thinking about these communication topics to the extent that you move into John Gottman's bedroom and you go to bed every night with him, and you tuck him in, and you help him co-author the sequel to The Science of Trust. Oh, you get real good at it. Okay, now as good as you can get, if you have the ability to have an implant that gives you the ability to real time feel the emotions empathic of the people around you, there's no way you can have a technique compared to that. And that's really what synthetic biology and nanotechnology and AI are effectively doing, is they're pushing us in a direction where you get new senses, new capabilities, new ways of thinking, uh, higher order thinking, long time horizon thinking. Imagine if you could put yourself in a state where real time passing is maybe just a few minutes or a few hours, but it's like Captain Picard in The Inner Light, where he lived an entire lifetime in 23 minutes or whatever. You potentially could do that with this technology. So, if you want, for example, to understand the lived experience of an African American in the Deep South in the 1950s, you could just hallucinate for 20 minutes and be that person and live their life start to finish for 60 years in 23 minutes. I mean, literally, this is what this technology can do in its highest order. So what does that translate to? It's like, well, as much as you can do empathy training, the fact that you have that capability, that's going to be so radically transformative to the human race. And it's going to put us on a very different footing and very different level. And these are just primitive examples. I can't give you the real good stuff because I can't conceive of the real good stuff. Whereas the existence of this will give that to you.
Yeah, and I was watching an interview with Elon. Maybe he did it in the past 3 or 4 days, and that because somebody asked why he's so obsessed with off-planet stuff and AI and all of this, and he explained like Hitchhiker's Guide, and he the whole notion of what is the meaning of life and 42, and his point is, and these technologies combine, these 4 or 5, even blockchain, but you're saying 4, the 4 horsemen, is that it's exactly like you just said. We don't even know what questions to even ask. So that's going to expand our question set, where we're going to have new notions of even the questions that we're supposed to ask, or the things we're supposed to take, that we're supposed to value even. So that's why it's so fundamentally life-changing.
Right.
And I agree with you. Like, I see where you're going with it, but I still think techniques like attune, and I can't name all the acronyms, but part of it is understanding and empathy. It's basically just being attuned with somebody, and how you communicate with each other, just being more aware and understanding, listening, all those beautiful things. Those techniques or tool sets are important to collaborate in order to get to the bigger, broader questions with the 4 horsemen. In the meantime, though, they're still good tools. It's just the tool set is going to expand more and more, and we don't know what that's going to look like. And that's why I think a lot of people are feeling existential crises right now, or just unknown. Like, I think even before AI, they were, right? Yeah. But now I've seen a big change in people, even folks that I'm talking to. It's just changed the game so completely that's why you're seeing so many of these. Even Lex, he is like AI person after AI person talking about it. Even Daniel Schmottenberger, I was just watching, he's great too.
We had a great conversation with him too.
Yeah. He's good. He has he has a little bit of a different perspective than the other folks too, but pretty much in line. But yeah, it's going to change so many things. So I guess what we have to do is just, how do you stay calm during this all, and how do you absorb it, and who do you trust, and how does this affect? Most people just want to know how it's going to affect their day to day, notwithstanding their business, right?
Yeah.
And people are really scared. Like, people are probably not going to want to have children because they don't quite know. They're already like that with social media, and it's changing. Like, even social media has changed the nature of how we think and how we focus and interface with each other. So that's just the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. And it's just, and as I said, there's just no way to even know what the questions are, and Elon agrees, and other people do as well. So it's just so phenomenal what could be done. Also, these 4 things can be used to build unlimited energy. You could build a Dyson sphere with it. You could do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. And what it means to be human will be fundamentally transformed. What does race mean when you live in a world where you can change your skin color just by thinking about it? I read a paper the other day where they took human skin cells and they combined it with the camouflage cells that live in octopi.
Oh,
So an octopus, if you look at an octopus and a chameleon, they can actually change their skin color to match their environment.
whoa.
So they found a way to actually hybridize a
In
human
humans?
skin cell and get a human skin cell to be able to change almost like an LCD. Like your monitor can go blue and red and green.
That's crazy.
Human skin
We were
cell
talking
can
about
do
that with textiles, but
Yeah.
like you can actually do it with your actual skin now. Well, potentially.
And that's what synthetic bio and nanotech
Yeah.
is basically going to do. Is it going to
It's
give you that
crazy.
capability so you can go from white to black to red to yellow and purple and any shade that you want, and people will do this at some point.
Yeah.
So it's just such a vastly different world, and we're not ready for it. Going back to Attune, the concepts of things like awareness of bids and being able to turn towards them and being tolerant of them and understanding where a person's coming on and not reacting and not judging and then having empathy for it.
Very good. That was the whole Attune.
That's the whole Attune.
That's good.
These concepts are 20th century, 21st century, early 21st
Yes.
century thinking. And the problem is that most of us are still running on 19th century or early 20th century software.
Yep.
So you're absolutely right. They're tremendously beneficial, and we need to do it. And that's why the absence of it is why we have so many toxic relationships.
Otherwise, you
and
will
toxic
skip
workplaces.
steps. You're going to skip
Right.
steps. You're going to have the software of that, and then you're going to skip that step, and then you're going to be thrown into that world, and people are going to beyond have an existential crisis. It's just going to be beyond that if you don't even learn that intermittent step.
Yes, and the problem is that while we're trying to catch up with where we should be, we're exponentially growing, and the wisdom gap is broadening with the technology. So it's becoming a really huge issue. And actually, there's a great book called Life, I think 3.0 from Nick Bostrom that talks about the wisdom gap.
Oy.